Here is another question that was sent from one of our viewers who was in the process of building a stairway like this using brackets to connect the treads to the stringers, except for the fact that the stairway was going to be about 7 foot wide and used for a commercial building. So keep in mind that some industrial, commercial, and public stairways might need to be structurally stronger. And I've ran into this case more than once. So let's just say that you're going to build or design a stairway like this one here. The first thing you're going to want to think about is using larger treads. For example, you can forget about using a 2x12, and I've used a lot of 3x12s before and even 4x12s. However, I have never used a 6x12, but that might be something to consider. And next up on the list will be to add a center stair stringer, and that could be a 2x12 or even a 4x12 if needed, and you might need to use more than one of them. So let's just go ahead and take a look at how we can attach the stringer to the floor, concrete floor, wood floor, and how we can attach the treads to the stringer, because it's going to be difficult to get a long screw through here. And I'm not about to suggest that it's impossible, and if you can use longer screws, then go for it. Keep in mind that these are only examples and they might not work for your project. So one method would be to use the same brackets that you are using on the other stringers, and of course the same fasteners. Another would be to use another type of building hardware, like these framing anchors. And you could always put them on both sides and stagger them if needed. So if you remember, we had one on the other side, but it was located closer to the front of the tread. And again, you can use more than one stringer, depending upon the width of the stairway. Another idea would be to fill the riser area with some type of a board that could be connected with the building hardware of your choice, and if possible, screws, nails, or lag screws, depending upon the thickness of the riser and the length of the stairway or the width of the stairway. And of course, you could use as many nails or screws as you feel necessary to create the proper connections for this design. And keep in mind that a lot of building codes today require closed risers, especially if you're dealing with a stairway that is going to be used for a fire escape or fire egress, and that these materials might need to be at least 1.5 inches thick to create a 1-hour fire rated stairway. Next up on the list, maybe we could use some type of metal brackets that you could have fabricated at most metal fabricating shops, or maybe make them yourself. And this could just simply be a piece of angle iron with a couple of holes in it that you could attach with lag screws. And again, you could use as many as you need or use larger ones, or you can even contact a structural engineer to find out what they would suggest. And this is something you might need to do anyway, especially if you're dealing with your local building department and building inspectors. And the last suggestion, and one that I think would be the easiest to do, would be to build a wall underneath the stairway. And again, you can use more than one wall depending upon the width of the stairway and the size of the treads that you're going to be using. And of course, you can change the material sizes and even rotate the materials 90 degrees if you need more surface support area underneath the tread. Now keep in mind that this design here allows us to connect to the back of the tread and the front of the tread, creating support for both the front and the back. And of course, you can use a few of these different ideas, like the screws going through the treads, or even the building hardware to attach the 2x4s to the treads. Now in this example here, I do not recommend less than a 1-inch overhang or positioning any of your support braces closer than 1 inch to the front of the stair tread. And the reason for that is because there's a good chance people walking up the stairway are going to hit the front of their feet on almost every one of these boards if they are closer than 1 inch away from the front of the tread. So I would suggest moving them back, and to do that, all you're going to need to do will be to create some type of a spacer like we have here, something that creates at least a 1-inch distance here. And of course, that will be another lesson, if you are not paying attention to me now, that you will be more aware of as people start to use this stairway and complain about this being located right in the middle where everybody walks. And in this example, we are using a lag bolt to go all the way through the support board and the spacer into the back of the tread. And if you were using a 2x6 instead of a 2x4, you could always put 2 lag bolts in. And here we are also using one of the most common framing anchors imaginable in the construction industry to connect the support brace to the bottom of the tread. We do not want the treads moving up and down. Everything needs to be secured and firmly attached to prevent potential future problems for a stairway like this or its users. Here is another question from one of our viewers. They wanted to know how you could install thicker stair treads for stairs that use brackets or brackets that are connecting the treads to the stringers. And to do this, I thought it would be best to use a model that would represent the exact riser height and tread depth for this stairway. So let's go ahead and move it over to here to where you can see the riser height and the tread depth is the same all the way up the stairway. And let's go ahead and zoom in on that. Give you a better view of it there. From the top, you can see that the front of each step is positioned correctly. And then let's take a look at what would happen if you installed a stair tread that was 1 inch thicker. And you can see how it raised the first riser height, yet the second 2 are the same, and then lowered the last one. And this is the problem you're going to be dealing with if you don't make any modifications to the stairway. So the first repair method you could try, if it's going to work better for you, would be to remove the amount of material you've increased the treads to, in our example here, 1 inch, off of the bottom of both sides of the stringers. And then lower the stringers. You can see here where we've put everything back to where it needs to be. However, we've also created a problem at the top of our stairway. This is just a cosmetic problem. And once the stringers are refastened to the deck, floor, or landing, then you shouldn't have a problem structurally. And if that idea doesn't work for you, leave the stringers where they are originally located, and then go ahead and remove the treads. And in this situation here, we're simply going to relocate the brackets. We're going to lower them 1 inch in this case, or the exact measurement that we've increased the tread size to on both sides of the stairway, and then go ahead and reinstall the stair treads to solve this problem. Here is another helpful tip for anyone who is building, repairing, or remodeling a stairway that uses metal brackets to connect the treads to the stringers and would like to relocate the treads either a little farther forward or a little further backwards. And the first thing I want to point out is that the riser height will not be affected at all by moving the treads forward or backwards. And for the most part, by moving the treads forward or backward, you're not going to affect the bottom distance between the front of this tread and the front of this tread. Or in other words, the measurement that is going to be measured by the building inspector. And I do have other videos on that in our stair building code area at the website if you're looking for more information on how to calculate that measurement. However, at the top of the stairway, you're going to have a problem unless the floor, landing, or deck framing is done incorrectly. So in our example here where everything is done correctly, we have an 11-inch measurement between the front of the step and the front of the floor framing. And at the bottom, we have the same thing. We've got 11 inches between the front of the step here, back here, and the front of the step above it. And if you notice the distance right here, we're going to go ahead and change it. We're going to move each one of the steps 2 inches forward. And for those of you who guessed it, at the top, we're going to have a 2-inch gap now between the back of the tread and the floor framing. However, like I said, the riser height wouldn't have changed on this, but the length of the last tread is now 2 inches longer. We have a 13-inch long step at the top. And to fix this, we're going to need to add a filler board to the back of the tread and extend the length of the floor framing by 2 inches. Now, this is one way to fix this. You can add or subtract materials at the top to compensate for whether you're moving the treads forward or backwards. Or we can remove some of the material from the stair stringers. If I take 2 inches off of both sides of the stair stringers, I can shove the entire stairway forward, go back to the original framing, and everything will work out just fine. And if you notice, I drew this line here. This is the same line I drew in our first example and kept it there as a reference point so you can kind of give a better idea of what we're doing. In this video, I will provide you with a couple of methods you might be able to use to repair a bracket type stairway where the bracket might be loose because part of the stair stringer is rotted. And this could be from termites or dry rot, some type of moisture problem, or even the fact that the stairway hasn't been maintained or painted and sealed properly. And keep in mind that some of these methods can be used for more than one bracket. And of course, if the damage is beyond repair, make sure that you replace the stringer. So let's go ahead and start with our first suggestion, and that will be using a larger bracket. You could make your own bracket or purchase something that you might be able to use to where you can relocate the lag screws or bolts, whatever you're going to use, to reattach the bracket to the wood stair stringer. Another method that might work for you would be to install some type of additional lumber. And this could be a 1x4, a 2x4, 2x6, or anything else that would allow you to reattach the bracket to the wood stair stringer. And I realize some of you are worried about covering the wood rot, and I don't blame you, or termite damage, and I'm here to tell you that I'm going to have to leave that up to you, because sometimes when you cover wood rot and you don't treat it or seal it somehow or remove all of the wood rot you possibly can, it could still remain a problem. The wood rot could get worse. Same with the termite damage. And again, something to think about. Next up on the list would be to use a larger piece of lumber. Again, this could be a 2x12 or 2x14, and it can be shaped to fit the stair stringer and even beveled up here, as you will see in the next example. And you could always install some type of an adhesive in between your new board and the stringer. And yes, you could use treated lumber if that's going to work for you. Just make sure that this gap right here is sealed and maintained, because if there are any cracks or gaps there, you're going to allow moisture to get in between the two pieces of lumber. And again, that could accelerate the process. And for those of you wondering why I'm even showing this, it's because I've seen people use these types of repairs incorrectly and on stringers that should have been replaced in the first place, instead of doing any repairs like I'm suggesting in the video. And in our final method, you might choose to drill some holes all the way through the stringers to reattach the brackets to. And keep in mind that this method here might work just as good without this board, depending upon how much damage you have to the stringer. And of course, the bevel I was referring to, a bevel like this could prevent someone's shoelaces or parts of their clothing from snagging here. And this could also be a problem for other repairs I've already suggested. You might want to bevel or round off the corners on some of these pieces to prevent any type of safety problems. And another thing you're going to need to do will be to reduce the length of the stair tread by the amount of lumber that you've added to the stringer. And in our example here, that would be 3/4 of an inch. And the last thing I want to mention will be that you might need to check with your local building department to find out what the minimum width of your set of stairs is, to make sure that you're not making it smaller than that. And most of the time on residential stairs, that will be 36 inches. Here is another common problem for stairways that use brackets to attach the treads to the stringers. And of course, that would be when the treads warp, twist, bow, cup, shrink, you name it, and the lag bolts or any of the screws that are used to attach the brackets to the treads become loose, and the treads, of course, start to move. So just to give you an idea, you're usually going to use a lag screw like this or a lag bolt, and it's going to attach the bracket to the tread, or the bracket will attach to the tread and the stringer, which of course would make a nice connection for this. But like I said, every once in a while, the lumber shrinks, it bows, cups, and these things get loose. For those of you who do not understand what I'm talking about, when I say that these treads or the lumber will move, it will twist and cup, you name it. This is kind of what I'm talking about. It could lift up in the front, lift up in the back. And of course, if it's too much, then the tread will need to be replaced, no doubt about it. If it isn't too bad, you can always try installing another lag screw with a washer, something like this. And before you do something like this, try to push the tread down. And, you could do that with some type of C-clamps. You could even take a board and shove the board underneath the tread above and push down on the top of this. Use some type of a lever to push down and then have someone else tighten it up. But this right here would be a starter fix. This would definitely be something you could start with. And if for some reason this does not work, then you can always drill a hole through the tread. And of course, you could do it to all three of them if necessary. But if you have something sticking up on the front, but it's tight in the back, you might just need to put one of these in. And of course, it might need to be countersunk so that the head of the bolt isn't sticking up. And of course, you don't want to create a trip hazard. And this also might need to be filled. You might need to put this in and then fill this with some type of a filler so that it's flat, or at least there's not something that someone can get their shoe caught on while using the stairway. And this would be highly unlikely you're going to step in there, but you wouldn't want to have that sticking up. And then, of course, you could simply pull it down by tightening the nut. And they do sell bolts that have a flatter head that might work. I'll leave that up to you. You can get a little creative. They have carriage bolts that won't need to be countersunk in as much instead of doing something like this. So carriage bolts might work better. And of course, I have seen bolts or screws with some type of a flat head that might just work perfect for something like this. Now, if you have carpeting, this might work. You might be able to just pre-drill some holes through the carpeting and then install a couple of screws. I've done this before. Try to get a longer, heavy-duty screw if you can. Of course, this would depend upon the fibers of the carpet. If you have a shorter carpet, then you might not even be able to use this idea. You have carpeting that's a little thicker. You might be able to use this and with some thicker screws. And I don't think you're going to need to put a bunch of screws in there, but I don't know. You might need to put 2 on this side and then 2 on the other side, something like that to keep it from moving. And of course, you could always go in from the back. This might be better. Again, you're just trying to keep it from moving. And if it's moving in the front, this won't do you any good in the back, but it might do you good to put a screw in the front, depending upon whether or not it's carpeting or you have some type of a finish on here. If you have a finish on here on the top, you're going to have to do all of your repairs from the bottom. And that might be as simple as just moving the bracket, loosening or taking it off, taking the lag screws out, and then simply sliding it in over to where you can get some new wood here. Because most of the time these lag screws, when they become loose, it's because the wood is no longer gripping to the lag screw. And that, again, this could be a simple fix by simply moving it and reinstalling the lag screws into some fresh wood. And this might not work. I'm just kind of throwing it out there. You could use some framing hardware. A lot of times when you have something on the top like this, it could catch. You're walking down here, you don't think it's that big of a deal, but let's say you're dragging something. I've just seen too many people catch something on the stairs, and something like this could be that something. And if that's the case, you might not want to use this method. So anyway, I hope it helps. If it does, you know what to do. Hit the old thumbs up button. And thanks for watching. To learn more about home building and repairs, visit us at our website. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content. See you next time.